Hello everyone. This is the 40th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 111, Cure, Dreams, and Another Deal. Astoria watched as Quinn's hand left her, the glowing veins disappear and the glow recede. She lifted her hands and clenched her fists, and surprisingly, she was able to clamp them hard instead of the weak fist that she usually made while suffering from the blood curse. Her body also no longer felt weak and fatigued, like she was feeling a few minutes ago. I feel strong, but how? She thought and looked up at the reason this was happening, who was pulling down his sleeves and buttoning them back into place. Astoria? She turned her face to her sister Daphne, still spinning from the shock and surprise. Hey, are you all right? You're crying. Is something wrong? Do you feel well? Asked Daphne in surprise and worry. Astoria touched her face, and indeed she felt her fingers stained wet with tears. No, I am fine. Everything is fine, said Astoria, with her voice cracking with emotion. And with that, the dam broke, and Astoria started to cry, startling both Quinn and Daphne. Quinn, who was putting back his outer robe, became startled when he heard Astoria break down and looked at Daphne for assistance. Daphne leaped into action to her sister's side on the bed and hugged her close to provide comfort. Astoria grabbed onto her sister and hugged her tight. Quinn felt like he was intruding on a family moment, just as he did at the start of the year, so he once again stood very still to become invisible while his magic silently fixed his clothes. Astoria calmed down and gently pulled herself out of Daphne's embrace. She turned to face Quinn and swiftly got off the bed to trap Quinn in a very tight hug, surprising the boy with the strength coming from the small figure. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, repeated Astoria while trying to meld herself into Quinn. Quinn gently hugged the girl, who he felt was trying to perform a fusion with him, and patted her on the back. Don't mention it. Also, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Astoria nodded into his shirt and gradually stopped crying before separating from Quinn. She looked up towards Quinn and smiled as he had told her to. See, that looks much better, smiled Quinn and booped Astoria on her nose. Also, we need to talk, so get back on the bed. Astoria nodded before climbing back onto the bed, and from the way she was sitting, anyone could tell that she was feeling much better. Quinn sat back down on his stool and spoke. Now, I fulfilled what I promised, but he stared at both the Greengrass sisters and continued after a pause. You can't tell anyone outside your family about what I did. Daphne and Astoria immediately had confused expressions on their faces. They couldn't understand why Quinn would want to hide the fact that he could erase the blood curse. I'm not supposed to know what I did. What I used to repress the curse isn't looked positively at by the world, spoke Quinn and rolled his eyes at the end of the sentence. What do you mean? Quinn knew that if he wanted to continue to treat Astoria, he would need to tell them what he was doing. She needed to know what he was using to help her. The curse is called blood malediction, so I used the same branch of magic to repress the effects of the curse. I used blood magic. Daphne and Astoria's eyes widened because they knew what Quinn was implying. Blood magic was considered dark magic and something not to dwell in. That branch of magic was associated with evil sacrifices, to defiance nature in twisted ways, cruelty, and was seen as forbidden theurgy. The blood malediction, as the name suggested, was a type of blood magic. It was the classic type of magic which was seen as dark magic. You might not know this, but I have been studying healing magic with Madame Pomfrey, so she especially can't know that I used blood magic to help you. If she knew what I did, she would definitely stop teaching me, and I don't want that, stated Quinn, and he was serious about the relationship that he had with Poppy and didn't want this to jeopardize what he had built over the years. Of course, we all know that blood magic is considered dark magic. But I couldn't give two hoots about that. Magic isn't dark or light, the labels are our creation. Your ancestor was cursed with blood magic, and now I use the same magic to cure you. This just shows you that magic can transform into whatever the user desires. Unfortunately, others and even you too might not see things as I do, and that is fine because I don't care. But I don't want others to know that I can use it because it will bring me a lot of trouble, which I would like to avoid, sighed Quinn when he thought about society's views. So if you don't want to continue with this, I completely understand, but then I'd have to pretend that this never happened. When Madame Pomfrey returns, you can simply tell her that you are feeling better. She won't know why you suddenly feel better if she doesn't know what to look for, so if you don't tell her, this entire treatment will go unnoticed. She will scratch her head for a while, but, after a while, she'll attribute this to the curse's unpredictability, and you will be free." Quinn folded his hands over his lap and asked, "So what is your decision? Any side effects and/or backlashes that may come up because of this treatment?" Daphne inquired because of the nature of the magic. "As long as I'm not kicked in the face while treating Astoria, she will not suffer from complications of any kind." The magic that Quinn had used on Astoria was a combination of his knowledge on 3 separate sources. He knew about blood magic from having studied for 2 years, and he had never stopped learning it since then. Healing magic was in his current active rotation, and the last was the most recent enlightenment in water magic. One of the components that made up blood was plasma and constituted more than 50% of blood. And 90% of plasma was water. Having mastery over water magic didn't allow blood manipulation because it was closely tied to magic and a being's life force. But because Quinn knew both blood and water magic, he could apply the knowledge about water's connection to life and transfer it to blood, which was also connected to the life force. Quinn had a firm grasp on what he had done to Astoria. As long as he wasn't uprooted during the treatment, there were 0% chances that he would fail. Astoria, who was a first year and didn't consider herself knowledgeable about magic, left the decision to Daphne. Daphne thought for a while before answering, "We will have to ask our parents before we make any decision." "Of course, I have no complaints if you consult your parents. Talk it out, and if you feel comfortable, I will continue to help Astoria out," nodded Quinn. "From my estimates, Astoria will be fine for another month and a week before the curse surfaces again. So get in contact with me before that." The Greengrass sisters nodded in response. Quinn got up from his stool, picked up the rabbit cage from the floor, and placed it on the bed. "Good, I think it's time for me to leave. When Madame Pomfrey returns, please pass her this cage and tell her that I dropped by." But then he suddenly turned his head back and whispered, "Forget it, she is here." He turned back to the sisters and reminded, "Hush on what happened." A mischievous glint sparkled Quinn's eyes as a grin made its way to Quinn's face. He picked up the rabbit cage in his hands and jumped out from behind the curtains that covered the view of the bed. "Madame Pomfrey, I'm here." Poppy, who had just entered the hospital wing after a trip to the dungeons and was thinking about the potion she needed to brew for the poor Astoria Greengrass, suddenly and unexpectedly came face to face with her student, Quinn West. "Kaya!" A surprised cry filled the hall as the small crate of ingredients she had brought dropped. Quinn, who wasn't expecting her to be holding things, moved very quickly and levitated the crate and all items inside it before any of them hit the floor and made them fly towards him. Now, he had the rabbit cage in one hand and the ingredient crate in the other. Poppy calmed down and was now glaring death beams at Quinn with a palm above her heart. Quinn blinked and half chuckled in nervousness, "Oops. Quinn, stand still and let me pelt you with stinging hexes. I promise it will hurt a lot, so just stand here," huffed Poppy and took out her wand with hands shaking in anger. "Madame Pomfrey, you can hurt me later, but I believe you will want to check up on your patient. She tells me that her condition has suddenly changed," informed Quinn in an attempt to not get hit by stinging hexes. Poppy's anger vanished in an instant, and she hurried towards Astoria's bed to check up on her. "What happened? How are you feeling?" "Did it get worse?" asked Poppy as soon as she laid her eyes upon Astoria and moved closer to observe her. No, it didn't get worse. I'm feeling much better," beamed Astoria, and her eyes subconsciously moved towards Quinn at the back. Poppy frowned at the response, but as she checked the signs, she did see that Astoria's complexion had improved, and she looked much more lively. Poppy cast some spells to check on her condition, and similar results came up. Astoria had indeed recovered, and the previous signs she had diagnosed were no longer evident. And just like Quinn had said, Poppy fussed for a while, but when she wasn't able to see any negative signs, Poppy concluded that Astoria was indeed healthy. "Stay here today for observation. If there are no complications, you can leave," concluded Poppy. "That's good, isn't it, Astoria?" grinned Quinn before turning to Poppy and speaking, "Madame Pomfrey, here you go. This is the rabbit you gave me yesterday. I have cured and healed him, and he is ready to hop and hump like any other bunny." Quinn suddenly set the cage into Poppy's hands and waved goodbye to everybody. "See you all later." Madame Pomfrey, I will drop by tomorrow. He had to get out here before Poppy remembered that she needed to kill Quinn with stinging hexes. Astoria waved back before speaking to Daphne as she pushed. I'm fine now, you should also leave. She faced Quinn and said, Quinn, would you escort my sister? Quinn, who was about to bolt, stopped and nodded. Sure, I wouldn't mind. He turned to Daphne and asked, shall we? Are you sure you don't need me here? Asked Daphne. No, I'm fine, and Madame Pomfrey is here to take care of me, smiled Astoria and once gave her sister a little push. Daphne observed Astoria for a moment before nodding. She walked towards Quinn and the two left the hospital wing. Should I say it? Astoria looked at the now empty hospital wing and smacked her lips. She then faced Madame Pomfrey and spoke with a mischievous shine in her eyes. Quinn escaped from the pinching hexes. He thinks that, but when he comes back tomorrow, I'm going to get him, snorted Poppy as she went through the ingredient crate to see if anything was broken. Astoria giggled before asking, anyway, Madame Pomfrey, what do you do in a day as the matron? Poppy suddenly had a bad feeling, and when she looked up, she saw Astoria with a big smile on her face. She immediately knew the reason for the bad feeling, and the reason was the smile on Astoria's face was the same one Quinn had had when he came to the hospital wing and wanted to talk. Oh, no. You're just like him, aren't you? Scene break. Daphne and Quinn walked out of the hospital wing and, as Astoria had asked of him, Quinn escorted Daphne to the dungeons. He looked at Daphne and noticed that there was a lost expression on her face. What are you thinking about? Daphne looked up at Quinn and stared at him for a few seconds before opening up. I want to become a healer. A noble profession, responded Quinn shortly because he could see that Daphne had more to say. I was 7 years old when Astoria showed the first sign of the curse. Our parents clearly explained what the curse was, and it took a while to understand the seriousness of the condition. But when I did, I decided to become a healer so that I would one day cure the blood curse from Astoria. There was a faraway look on her face while Daphne continued to speak. As the years passed, I saw Astoria get sick every month because of the curse, and that strengthened my desire to become a healer. She paused for a second and took a deep breath before continuing. She is the complete opposite of me. So lively, cheery, bright. She's a person that always wants to run to discover new things. But she can't do any of that because the curse will re-emerge if she gets too physically active. Her curse always gets in the way of doing the things she loves. She likes the outdoors, but she can't go outside because she gets sick. She'd love to run around and fly on the broom all day long, but she can't because of that curse. She turned to Quinn and looked Quinn straight in the eyes. Do you know we were worried about whether she would be able to get around Hogwarts with all the corridors and staircase without the curse re-emerging. That's how much the curse affects her. We even worried if she would be able to attend the school. Quinn gently directed Daphne to the side of the corridor and stopped walking because Daphne was feeling very emotional right now. Something that surprised Quinn because this was the most emotion he had seen from Daphne. Are you sure that Astoria will be free from the blood curse as long as you continue to treat her? Asked Daphne, and to assert the seriousness, she grabbed Quinn's wrist and maintained firm eye contact with him. I'm assuming that you're wondering whether the curse will re-emerge if she gets more active? Asked Quinn. Yes. No matter what she does, even if she somehow manages to move around so much that she collapses because of fatigue, the curse won't flare. As long as I continue to treat her, the curse won't ever re-emerge. Daphne, if I continue to treat Astoria, she won't even face the 50-year age limit. She will, without a doubt, live way past it and continue to her natural lifespan. Daphne exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. I can tell you right now that if what you say is true, then our parents will agree no matter what. As long as this doesn't hurt Astoria, they will come to you and plead that you take care of her. Quinn noticed that Daphne didn't have a smile on her face even though her body had lost that tension that she had before Quinn answered her question. What is it? Is there still something on your mind? If you have any doubts, then ask me because I can answer them. Daphne leaned against the wall, stayed silent, and stared at the floor for a good while before starting. I wanted to become a healer because I could cure Astoria. But with you, I don't need to, do I? Now I feel a little lost and even though it might sound silly, a little sad. Ever since she understood Astoria's condition, Daphne had made it her life goal to become a healer to cure Astoria. And even though she was happy that Astoria would live a healthy life, Daphne wanted to be the one who helped her, but now with Quinn, that was over. "I think you are misunderstanding something here, Daphne," spoke Quinn, causing Daphne to look at him in confusion. "What do you mean? Astoria isn't cured. I'm simply repressing her curse, and that isn't a cure. If I stop, she will once again start to live as she has been until now." Daphne frowned because she knew all this but wasn't following what Quinn was trying to say. "Life is unpredictable. I can die on a random day, and that would start the clock on Astoria's life. She can be struck with a curse that might hinder my ability to work blood magic without making things worse. As I said, magic has infinite potential, and that also means that things can go wrong in so many ways." Daphne's eyes widened, and she now got what Quinn was trying to convey. What Quinn had wasn't a permanent cure, and as he said, if things went wrong, Astoria would return to square one. "So don't let go of that dream just yet because I have no idea how to actually cure Astoria. I might figure it out one day, but that day isn't anywhere soon. So, if you become a healer, you might be able to figure it out before me," shrugged Quinn. He was learning magic from an all-around perspective and didn't have any plans to specialize. Quinn wanted to learn everything and master everything, but that would take a long time, and that would also delay the discovering of Astoria's cure. "I have no plans to die and will continue to treat Astoria. And you know what? See this as an opportunity," smiled Quinn and put a different perspective on things. "I'm giving you time, I will keep Astoria healthy. So study, learn, experience magic while living your ideal life. And no matter how much time it takes, find the remedy and cure your sister." Quinn put out a hand forward for a handshake and asked, "Deal?" Daphne looked at the outstretched hand and then at Quinn. She thought back to the things Quinn said, and a determined light appeared in her eyes. She grabbed Quinn's hand and shook it. "Deal." "Excellent," beamed Quinn. Chapter 112, Infiltration, Kidnapping, Shrieking Shack. 3 men stood at a shady and hidden corner of Hogsmeade. The 3 men had arrived individually and converged at the position they had been given. "Do you know what we're going to do today?" asked one of the 3 men. Another man glanced at the one who had said that and asked back, "Are you new? Is this your first time?" "I have been on one of the sweeps for Muggles and Muggleborns, but there were more people than this." He looked at the other 2 and said, "If you get what I mean." The 3rd man joined the discussion and shared his own experience. "This is different from the sweeps. If I am correct, this is going to be something different." "So you don't know what we are going to do today?" asked the first man. The other 2 looked at each other before shrugging and shaking their heads. "No, I was just asked to arrive at this place at a certain time," answered the second man. "The same instructions for me as well," said the 3rd man, but then he asked, "Were you guys asked to bring that?" "The uniform, you mean?" asked the man and pulled out a matchstick bag from his robes. "Yeah, the uniform. I mean, if that was asked. Do you think we have to?" As the 3 men talked, an invisible Rivers Lock, under cover of a disillusionment spell, was listening and observing the 3 men. These 3 men had been selected from the Axionites that had responded to his calls. All 3 were chosen because they were easy to control and had something that would help him in what he was trying to accomplish. But before he revealed himself, Rivers wanted to see how these 3 reacted to the other. How were they feeling today? What did they discuss, the information they exchanged, and other traits that would help him decide on the finer details of the plan. Rivers never shared the complete plan with anyone. He always made sure that other than him, no one knew the entire picture. This way, he could limit the flow of information and isolate leaks if anyone decided to switch to the other side. And today, these 3 knew nothing other than the fact they were asked to bring their Hogwarts uniforms with them. These 3 will work. Yes, these 3 will do just fine, thought Rivers, and decided that it was time to start. He dropped the charm and revealed himself, startling them and caused them to take out their wands. "It's good that all of you are here on time. It would have been unfortunate if you were late," said Rivers before glancing at the wands and then at their owners. "Drop the wands. I'm your leader today." The 3 breathed a sigh of relief and withdrew their wands back into their robes. "Do you have the orders?" asked one of the men. "Yes, I do. I received the orders from one of the higher-ups. They said that this is quite important, replied Rivers and began establishing his image among the three. All right, who is A, B, and D? Asked Rivers. The three told Rivers about their assigned alphabets. I see, here you go. These are your potion vials, said Rivers as he handed them potion vials with the letters A, B, and D and kept the vial with the letter C. Of course, he already knew about their letters, but he wanted to establish that he was just one of them and was assigned to be the leader. That is why he gave himself the alphabet C, as that would imply that he wasn't unique or separate from them. What are we going to do? Rivers took out a shrunk-down uniform from his robes and showed it to them. I think you have already guessed it, but we are going to Hogwarts. He lifted his vial and continued. These are reverse-aging potions. They will return your outer appearance to your Hogwarts years. We're going to drink these, put on our uniforms, and go inside the castle. How are we going to get inside Hogwarts? Today isn't a Hogsmeade weekend, asked the second man. Rivers put on a fake yet flawless grin as he answered. Through the shrieking shack. All three men shivered and looked at each other in worry. The building was famous for being haunted. None of them had ever approached the abandoned building in their school years. I have been briefed that there's a secret tunnel in there that opens up in the castle grounds. We are going to use that tunnel and get inside to complete the mission. What are we going to do inside? Asked the third man. The other two men also looked on with the same curiosity, wondering what they were about to do inside Hogwarts. Rivers dropped the grin and revealed today's objective in simple words. We are going to kidnap the boy who lived and kill him in front of everyone. He paused and put on a proud expression. For the Dark Lord. The three young, pureblood men, who had joined Novellus Actionites because they believed the Voldemort ideology, nodded and felt the fear of entering the shrieking shack lesson as they felt they were doing something revolutionary. Scene break. Are you sure we aren't going to be recognized? Asked one of the Actionites, looking uncomfortable in the state he was. He looked around the castle and, if the situation had been different, he would have felt nostalgia. Nonetheless, right now, all he felt was anxiety. Rivers looked at the man, who looked uncomfortable, and nodded. No one will be looking at your faces. You can hide behind your clothes, and people will turn blind. Within the school, if you have a uniform, no one will give you a second look. All four people had entered the castle wearing Gryffindor-styled Hogwarts uniforms. Rivers was also wearing a Gryffindor-styles robe, but he had been Slytherin in his time at Hogwarts. The three men had been chosen because they had been from Gryffindor and knew some key areas of the castle like the Gryffindor Tower. Tell me, where would be the best place to grab and stun a Gryffindor student? Asked Rivers, his body relaxed. Rivers had ordered one of the men to take him to the places where Gryffindors frequented so that he could scout the places where the nabbing could take place. He had left the rest of the group to one of the places he had found in his school career that wasn't frequented by students. I would say that the base of Gryffindor Tower is a good place. Every lion will have to pass through there to get to the common room, replied the Actionite grunt. Rivers hummed in thought before scratching the location out of the viable options. No. If every Gryffindor goes through there, then the chances of being seen are high. How about the passages around the quad, especially the ones near the suspension bridge? We can wait at the ones that lead to the Gryffindor Tower and get the brat there, offered the man turned into child. Rivers rolled his eyes in a way such that the grunt couldn't see it and internally sighed. Not there, students from all houses walk those passages. Too much risk and exposure, said Rivers, keeping his voice straight to hide the contempt towards the stupid plan. As they passed the Great Hall, Rivers' eyes caught the notice wall, which had, understandingly, all kinds of notices on it. He stopped and walked towards the wall to get a good look. The man-child grunt followed Rivers and gave the wall a cursory glance while Rivers read every notice, and it seemed it was the right move because he found something good. I found the perfect place, smiled Rivers, and a plan immediately formed in his mind. Huh, where? Asked the grunt in confusion. The Gryffindor team booked the pitch from after lunch till the closing time. Rivers pointed out the notice that mentioned the pitch schedule. Harry Potter, the youngest seeker in Hogwarts history. Rivers' smile widened as he decided how he was going to pull his plan. This is going to work. Scene break. I'm so tired, groaned Fred, wiping his body down with a towel. Oliver is going to kill us at this rate, continued George as he put a fresh shirt on his body. The Quidditch practice had just ended, and in the boys' locker room were the Weasley twins, Fred and George, along with Harry Potter. They were changing out from their Quidditch gear, while the captain was out to lock the ball kit into the storage closet. Harry sighed and stretched his hands above, trying to elevate the tension after keeping them at the broom for the entire practice. He was tired, but not as much as Fred and George, who had to be on alert for the bludgers all the time and had to use extra energy and stamina in hitting the bludgers with their beater bats. "Hey, did you hear about the new Ravenclaw chaser?" "What's his name?" asked Fred. He turned to George expecting an answer, but the other twin also couldn't recall. "I don't know, but they're saying that he is the real deal. The Ravenclaw keeper can't stop him from scoring." They both turned to Harry and asked in unison, "Harry, do you know?" Harry shut his locker and spat out the name of the newly added chaser of the Ravenclaw team. Eddie Carmichael. Harry didn't like Eddie since their previous meeting. He hadn't talked to Eddie after that, but whenever their eyes would meet, Eddie would raise up his chin and look at him as if he was looking down at him. "I mean, let the bloke play a game before putting him over the shoulders." "Playing in practice and in a game is different," grumbled Harry. He had been hearing the name too much. Even Oliver, who had been strict with his praises, had sung some after scouting a single Ravenclaw practice in secret. Fred and George got dressed quickly and left the locker room with their stuff. "Harry, we'll be waiting outside, so hurry up and come out." Harry turned and said, "I'll wait for Oliver. You guys go and see if the girls are ready." "All right we will see you two outside." Harry heard the door close and started packing his thing into his bag. Then he heard the door open up. "Oliver, hurry up," said Harry, thinking that Oliver had come back. "The rest are waiting outside." He turned back to see two people dressed in Gryffindor robes standing at the door, and then his world went black. Scene break. "It has been a while since we have done this, hasn't it?" said James Potter, looking at the decrypted walls of the two-store building. "It's been a while. We haven't done this since the Wolfsbane potion was discovered," answered Sirius Black as he whipped out his wand to clean the room they were standing in. "You both didn't have to do this. With me on the potion, I usually just sleep after I transform," spoke Remus Lupin, looking at his two friends who were here to keep him company. The three marauders stood in a room, a very disordered, dusty room. Wallpaper was peeling from the walls. There were stains all over the floor. Every piece of furniture was broken as if somebody had smashed it. And the windows were all boarded up. "To be honest, we aren't doing this for you," grinned Sirius as he took 2 bottles out from his coat. "We just wanted an excuse to get together so we can get plastered." Sirius and James were quite busy with their jobs as senior aurors, and the load had been recently heavier, with them interrogating and preparing for trials of the people arrested from the raids. Plus, both of them were also occupied with their seats in Wizengamot. James had been involved with politics since a long time ago. But Sirius was new to the scene and had only been handed the position after his grandfather, Arcturus Black III, had died. In his will he had reinstated Sirius into the family before his death. Remus, too, had a busy schedule as a professor at Hogwarts. A professor at Hogwarts needed to handle 7 years' worth of students, and thus it was quite a hectic job. With 3 friends busy with their lives, they decided to use Remus' werewolf transformation as a short time to catch up with each other. It was also a nostalgic thing for them as they did it during their school life. James squatted in front of a broken chair and pointed it as he looked at Remus. "Hey, do you remember this chair? I remember lifting it up with my antlers and throwing it at you." "I don't think that it's that chair." "I'm not even sure it was this room," remarked Remus. "Though I might be wrong. I don't remember much of those days. I didn't have the potion back then. All of it was kind of a blur." Sirius lifted and shook the 2 booze bottles with a rascal-like grin. "That is what we are trying to do. Make things blurry, but more fun." "Are you sure you can drink?" asked James as he got up from the floor and turned to Remus. "Will the effects change when you transform? The last thing we need to look out for is a drunk werewolf." Remus chuckled and shook his head. "No, as long as I take the potion without any addition to it when I drink it. I'll be fine." As for any changes? I will just be more sleepy, more silent, and probably go to sleep more easily. Oh, I wanted to wrestle like the old days, mock-whined Sirius, who had now sat down on a conjured sheet on the old floor with the booze bottles and glasses in front of him. He smacked the floor and called out, "Come on, now. Let's hurry. I want to get that buzz going." James and Remus chuckled before sitting down on the sheet as Sirius poured them drinks. Scene break. "What should we do with his stuff?" asked one of the Axionite grunt, holding up Harry's Quidditch. Rivers, who was making sure that Harry Potter was tightly bound and secured, looked at the grunt. "Drop it in here," replied Rivers. They had slowly and stealthily made their way back into the Shrieking Shack Whooping Willow secret tunnel. It had taken a while because Rivers wanted to make sure that they weren't seen. The task to smuggle the unconscious Harry Potter to this point had been difficult because they had to travel outdoors with nothing to hide them. Rivers had to purposely make the entire group move slower so as to not distort the effects of the disillusionment charm a lot. The grunt dropped the kit on the floor and asked, "Why did you make me take this?" If someone saw that the Potter brat was missing, but his things were still there, it would create some suspicion. But if his things aren't in view, they would think that he left on his own. And it would take time for them to figure out that he is missing, explained Rivers as he sat down on the ground of the rough tunnel. Unlike the grunts he had brought along, Rivers had thought about things and took steps that were beneficial to him and the success of this mission. "Why have you sat down?" asked another grunt. Rivers glanced at him and pointed at himself. "We're still under the effect of the potions. We can't go out like this. This isn't over, we still have work to do." Internally, he was sighing at the idiocy of everyone around him. "What do we have to do more? We are going to kill the boy who lived and make him a showpiece in the middle of the Hogsmeade. I want the world to know that their savior is dead. That will start the revolution," said Rivers, but he didn't have a smile on his face as things were going in his mind. "But we have to do it, and we have to do it quickly." "Why?" "Someone will know that the boy who lived is missing, and when they do, the entire Aura's office will move to find him out. The general public, too, will start looking for him. The entire community will be looking for him. And I mean everyone, even Death Eaters." He stared at the three grunts and said very severely. "And finally, Albus Dumbledore will look for him, and that is the worst threat. If Dumbledore starts looking, he'll find the boy quickly. That man is dangerous." Unlike almost everyone who looked at Dumbledore as he was the greatest thing under the sun, Rivers knew how much power Dumbledore held. He knew that Dumbledore had both political and magical power, and he had both of them in excess. To Rivers, Dumbledore was a person who was capable of controlling everything. He even thought that he was probably doing it already. "We need to complete this quickly and then separate from this boy. The longer we stay with him, the greater the chance of us getting caught. As I said, people will be looking for him, and when they do find him, we will be there." He stared at them and ordered, "We will move as soon as possible." And when they nodded, Rivers thought, "Though you guys won't be coming out of it alive." They had seen his face, and that connected him to Novellus Axionites. He couldn't have that, so they needed to die. Scene break. "Yeah, this is about it, I guess," smiled Quinn as he sat in front of Gary while approving some designs. "Good, you will get them by next week," nodded Gary and collected all the design papers. Quinn had arrived at Hogsmeade quite early and had been inside the Scrivenshafts, deciding upon the designs on the new AID cards and ordering more copies of his notes. He had arrived quite early, but Gary had showed him some new stuff, and that got Quinn interested, and he ended up going into research mode. And because Gary was free, Gary and Quinn bounced ideas off each other. Then came lunch, tea, and what was planned to be a single-hour ordeal turned into a multiple-hour affair. "I'm getting late. I need to get back to the castle," said Quinn as he looked at his pocket watch. He looked up and smiled. "Today was fun, Gary. Let's do it again sometime." After saying goodbye to Gary, Quinn looked in different directions and wondered, "Which passage should I take?" 7 passages connected Hogsmeade and Hogwarts, and Quinn liked to not repeat the passages. "Let's go through Shrieking Shack today," decided Quinn and started to walk towards the so-called haunted building, without looking at all at the rising full moon that shone in the evening sky. This marks the end of part 40 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.